What do you know about government contracts?
Multi-billion shillings contract.
During the Kibaki era, nearly 50 billion was lost on Anglo Leasing type contracts.
Anglo Leasing contract.
On Anglo Leasing type contracts.
And the multi-billion shillings Anglo Leasing scandal.
Let's call a spade a spade. I think this is the first time that we have had proper, or we believe we might have proper information that might actually lead us to who the true kingpins of corruption are in our republic.
A scandal that lasted for more than a decade.
Na wale ambao wanatupigia makelele ndio walikuwa mawaziri katika ile serikali ambayo ilitokota hii maneno ya Anglo Leasing. Sasa wanatupigia makelele ya kitu gani?
That left Kenyans more poorer.
You know, the billions of money that are being saved. You know, even now, most of the parents have not sent their children to school. You see, life is hard.
And reveal how inefficient our judicial system is.
The suspects then moved it to the High Court of Kenya, where they obtained judicial orders barring the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission from investigating.
This is a story of Anglo Leasing Saga. When Kibaki ascended in power as the third president of Kenya after 24 years of dictatorship and single-party KANU ruling Kenya since we gained independence.
Mimi Mwai Kibaki naapa kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
To Kenyans, he was a reflection of hope and a just ruler.
Fellow Kenyans, I am inheriting a country which has been badly ravaged by years of misrule and ineptitude.
First, he brought free education to Kenyans.
January 2003, the Kibaki government's dream of free primary education for all Kenyans was finally actualized, and the rush to reap the fruits from the new regime would see many primary schools across the country overstretched by the unexpected high enrollment of pupils.
And he fought years of corrupt scandals like the Golden Bag. Unfortunately, a year and a half after his election, the Anglo Leasing scandal rocked the nation. So how did this happen? To understand this, we'll have to go down deep this rabbit hole to the roots and genesis of Anglo Leasing scandal. Kibaki, who was a true reformist, did significant change when he was in power. For example, he appointed true reformists to key positions like the creation of National Commission on Human Rights and appointed Maina Kiai after years of atrocities from previous regime. On the side of our economy, it was steadily growing after it depreciated since 1990. In fact, Kenya managed to reach an average of 2.6 GDP growth between 2003 and 2007 as per capita and World Bank. Kibaki, who managed to be elected under National Rainbow Coalition and under alliance between National Alliance Party of Kenya and Raila Odinga's Liberal Democratic Party. The coalition had a pact agreement. If Kibaki was in power, 11 of 23 cabinet positions would be allocated to NAC and the rest of the 11 to LDP. Once Kibaki was in power, he reneged from the deal, appointing 13 from NAC and only 9 from LDP.
Okay, how are you? Thank you.
His commitment for fighting corruption was clear. He also passed a law obliging civil servants to declare their asset and wealth and forbidding them from conducting business activity. But just years of recovering from Goldenberg state capture, in 2003, the Anglo Leasing will be the biggest scandal in Kibaki era. A collective of 18 state security contract that was collectively worth 770 million US dollars, approximately 55 billion at the time. 13 out of 18 contracts were under President Daniel Moi. The other 5 after 2002 were under President Kibaki. In 2000, the Department of Immigration did a computer need assessment to eliminate fraud, forgery, inefficiency, and revenue loss that one would need to get a passport issuing system. This was to be done by restricted tender. The Ministerial of Tender Committee invited international firms to submit their bids. 2 British firms, Delarue Identity System and AIT International PLC. South Africa Face Technology, Site Kowai of Finland, and Johannes S. Hand of Netherlands submitted their bids. 3 firms responded to the bid. The decision was that AIT International PLC met both commercial and technical specifications for the award. However, the government budget for 2000 to 2001 did not cover for the 622 million Kenya shillings required by MIS AIT International to set up the system. So, the setup of passport system project was carried forward to 2002 to 2003. Now, 6 international firms were invited to the bid. The initial 5 and GET Group of the USA. For the second time, 3 responded to the deal. Delarue Identity System, South Africa Face Technologies, and GET USA Group. The previous AIT International PLC Group did not submit a bid. A technical committee of Government Information Technology sat down and agreed that none of the bids were responsive and recommended that they should not only be disqualified but also the passport system be redesigned and expanded to cover up other aspects of work of immigration departments such as border control and immigration. They made a resolution that the expanded system would have 5 components, which would be: first, high security new generation passport; second, secure passport issuing system; third, high security new generation visas; fourth, high security visas issuing system; 5, computerization of machine readable immigration records. One disadvantage of expanding the system was that it would cost more money, which would require the treasury to seek donor funds. And this was the gateway for Anglo Leasing and Finance firm. On the 1st August 2003, a firm named Anglo Leasing and Finance Limited of Liverpool in United Kingdom sent an unsolicited technical proposal to Permanent Secretary in the Vice President Office to supply and install an immigration security and document control system. The installation will be done by a subcontractor of Anglo Leasing, Francois Charles Oberthor of Paris, France, to ease funding problem. Anglo Leasing would offer a facility of 31,890,000 euros, which was equivalent to 2.67 billion Kenya shillings at the time. The funding was to be repaid at an interest of 5% over a 62-month period. The Public Accounts Committee was confused and thought this was irregular. A finance firm had prepared a detailed proposal for a project very similar to the one recommended by the Government Information Technology without a request from the government of the day. Something was not adding up. It's either someone leaked the information because the proposal had every need the government of the day wanted to finance the project, or it was a miracle. 1 month later, on 5th September 2003, the Vice President Office asked the Treasury to contract Anglo Leasing. Before the permission, the Attorney General advised the Ministry to do a due diligence on the efficiency and successful project the Anglo Leasing Company had done before. It was something like a background check. The green light permission for Anglo Leasing came through 25th November 2003. The government later signed an agreement for the supplier services and finance credit for Immigration Security and Document Control System on 4th December 2003. A month later, on 4th February, 91,678,169 Kenyan shillings was paid to Anglo Leasing Finance Company in a deal described as Agreement, Commitment and Administration. According to John Githongo, Anglo Leasing dossier to the president, all Anglo Leasing type shell companies were probably established by one Pritpal Singh Thethi, who was an accountant and engineer linked with Anura Perera. Thethi's main job was to set up shell companies, as he has done for the General Kibwana, Anura Perera and Deepak Kimani. Remember when we talked about something unusual and sinister about Anglo Leasing knowing every detail about the government bids without being invited? Yes, people started seeing beyond the smokescreen. This company routinely won large contracts to supply goods and services of inflated prices to the security services. Anglo Leasing was brought to life when Maoka Mwaure, MP for Ntonyiri, brought documents to Parliament revealing that Anglo Leasing Finance Company had been paid 91 million Kenyan shillings commitment fee amounting to a 3% of 2.7 billion Kenyan shillings to produce passports. The Department of Governance and Ethics wished to John Githongo to get to the bottom of this. John Githongo, while on a visit to the United Kingdom, he asked his associate Kroll to investigate Anglo Leasing. The results were astonishing, that no company like that existed. Githongo's suspect was that the affair was connected to powerful state connection in Kibaki administration. His early suspects were Vice President Mudi Awori, Kiraitu Murungi, Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, David Mwiraria, Minister for Finance, Chris Murunguru, Minister for Internal Security, PS Sylvester Mwalika, PS for Finance Joseph Mangari, PS for Internal Security David Mwangi, Alfred Gitonga, Deepak Kimani and Jimmy Wanjigi. In early stages of investigation, there were a series of private meetings. The Vice President as well as Ministers of Finance and Justice were really trying to stop the investigations. The scale of Anglo Leasing graft had deep state connection. That is recorded that even when investigation kicked off, additional payment and commitment fees were being processed. When these stories blew up and hit the media, the then Secretary of Cabinet, Francis Mudhaura, said that Anglo Leasing had contacted him and they promised to repay money that they had received. Shortly after this statement, in 14th May 2004, Anglo Leasing Finance Limited wired back 956,700,000 euros from Schroeder and Co Bank AG in Zurich. Deep investigation will reveal more. Remember, this contract was Moi idea. The brains for reviving it were Deepak Kimani, Jimmy Wanjigi, Chris Murangaru, Dave Mwangi, Alfred Gitonga, and Oyula. It was now clear that there were many contracts resembling the Anglo Leasing, and 16 of them became public, like the Sunday Corporation and Apex Finance Corporation, which managed to receive contracts worth more $145 million.
Let's call a spade a spade. I think this is the first time that we have had proper, or we believe we might have proper information that might actually lead us to who the true kingpins of corruption are in our republic.
As Anglo Leasing scandal came to light, there were forces to stop investigation from key players at the heart of the government. The then Minister of Finance Mwiraria said that he would not dare step into Parliament after a special audit report that was released by Controller and Audit General until the Treasury made some major changes. The then Minister of Justice, Kiraitu Murungi, scaling with caution that Mr. Githongo investigation should be careful not to knock out key political people like Alfie referring to Alfred Gitonga and Murunguru, who are key parts of the scandal. He later added that if Chris Murunguru is dropped and Alfie is dropped, we are in trouble. The enemy will have won. More politicians would later join the bus of fighting the investigation, saying that Gitongo's investigation threatened the stability of the regime. Both Mwiraria and Kiraitu hoped that the investigation would stop as soon as Anglo Leasing repaid the money. The cover-up effort would turn frantic. Francis Mudhaura even questioned the legal authority of Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission to conduct the investigation and implied that the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act was not a reasonable legislation.
Zile kandarasi zilikuweko katika ofisi ya rais. What I have an issue with and what is being mistaken for defiance or unwillingness to be investigated is the summons by the director of the Anti-Corruption Commission, where I am being asked to investigate myself. I am being asked to declare everything that I own on earth, what is owned by my friends, what is owned by my relatives, what is owned by me, my business associates.
One big issue surrounding the scandal is what the president knew and when he knew it. But when John Githongo met the president on 29 May 2004, Kibaki said that no one had briefed him and even asked to be furnished with a copy of the contract. 2 days later, Mudhaura would insist that the president had been fully briefed and it had been agreed. Immediate response was that the payment was stopped and authorities had to establish who Anglo Leasing was.
We have worked closely with many foreign agencies, including the FBI in the United States of America, the Serious Fraud Office in the United Kingdom, the Swiss Attorney General's Office, the Dutch police, and so on and so forth.
Later still, Mwiraria would make comment that the president had requested that they go easy on Anglo Leasing given that the money had now been returned. Mwiraria and Kiraitu would argue that if the public would get a whiff of this magnitude of corruption, the government would fail. It was unclear if the president had said this or Mwiraria and Kiraitu were using authority of the president to make it smooth with the investigation. From politicians fighting this investigation and Githongo getting threat messages through the early phase of investigation, Githongo feared his life and he fled the country in exile in United Kingdom in 2005.
KSCC has however been prosecuting a number of cases in connection to Goldenberg and Anglo Leasing, but the commission has been stung by courts ruling that would effectively stop cases of high-profile personalities. The judiciary, Justice Ringera says, is meddling.
What that means is that we cannot follow up overseas aspects of those investigations, because no country can go to investigate in another. You've got to rely on law enforcement agencies.
The suspects then moved to the High Court of Kenya, where they obtained judicial orders barring the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission from investigating security contracts, and all Anglo Leasing contracts were security contracts, because the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission is part of the executive branch of government and is bound by the decisions of the Attorney General. A wholly ridiculous argument, but nevertheless, it stands.
His analysis was that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election.
It's a country where more than half the population live in poverty, and it's never seen an election campaign as close as this one. The president, once universally popular, with people engaged in a search for a better life, is now struggling. If the opinion polls are to be believed, he could lose power to a former ally.
In November 2005, Kibaki, who promised to rule the country with transparency and honesty, he acted.
Kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scam. He said that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 days later, Kibaki would say that Anglo Leasing was a scheme to finance the 2007 election. 2 His first action was that he dropped Chris Murangaro from the cabinet on 1st February. David Moraria was also dropped days later, and the president accepted resignation from Kiraitu Murungi.
I have further accepted the request by Honorable Kiraitu Murungi to step aside from his responsibilities as the Minister for Energy in order to allow full investigations into allegations made against him in regard to the Anglo Leasing affair. I urge all Kenyans to exercise patience as the relevant arms of the law carry out investigations into these issues.
You know, the billions of money that are being saved, you know, even now, most of the parents have not sent their children to school. You see, life is hard.
80 MPs later demanded that the president should fire his vice president, Mudi Awori. The government would later impose the usual travel bans on the principals and announced to freeze their assets. It was unclear if this took place. Later, in 2007, the UK Serious Fraud Office tried to go down deep this rabbit hole and help Kenyans with this matter after Apex Finance Company received $30 million, which was related to Anglo Leasing companies. This transaction took place in April 2002 and February 2004 through channel tax havens in Jersey and Guernsey.
Right now, there is a gap of about just shy of 1 million votes between Raila Odinga and President Mwai Kibaki, and Kalonzo Musyoka there with just about over 300,000 votes, as you can see on your screen.
9 candidates contested this election. The results conveyed to the Commission by returning officers through the statutory forms, Form 16, the one I was showing you, these forms, are as follows. These forms are as follows. This means Honorable Mwai Kibaki is the winner. The Commission therefore declares Honorable Mwai Kibaki as the President of Kenya.
With Kibaki in power again, by 2009, efforts put in the investigation had died due to obstruction from Kenya. That same year, authorities from Switzerland also launched an investigation on the company involved in the scam, and they froze their bank accounts.
The government's top legal advisor, Professor Githu Muigai, today handed over a dozen documents to the Swiss government to assist it in investigating the Anglo Leasing saga. This followed a request from the Swiss government to Kenya to assist it zero in on those it believed to be responsible and culpable in money laundering in and out of Switzerland.
We are very far in identifying all the money flows from different parts of the world into Switzerland and then out of Switzerland, but it was very important to have elements gathered by the Kenyan criminal authorities.
They are on the tail end of quote, tail end of the investigation. So within a very short while, we will be able to tell who is to be prosecuted for what.
Sources told Citizen Television that the 5 suspects are former influential ministers in the Kibaki administration, 2 of whom are currently serving in the Senate.
Kibaki time as the president was finally due in 2013, as he passed the torch to Uhuru.
I, Uhuru Kenyatta, in full realization of the high calling, I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya, do swear that I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance to the Republic of Kenya.
And bear true allegiance to the Republic of Kenya.
Anglo Leasing was in the headline again, and Kenya had lost a lawsuit in Geneva filed by 2 Anglo Leasing companies linked to Anura Pereira, Pass Mercantile Securities Corporation, and Universal Satspace.
How do you feel, first of all, as a Kenyan, and secondly, as a president?
Terrible.
That it is your government that has to pay this?
Terrible. Terrible. Terrible.
Clearly a painful decision to make for the president, who has now authorized a one-bullet payment of the 1.4 billion shillings for 2 Anglo Leasing type contracts.
The country had to pay 1.4 billion to clear its debts in preparation for the launch of the foreign sovereign bond market known as the Eurobond.
We are faced with a challenge that myself and the majority of Kenyans believe we should not be paying. The courts have deemed that we must pay. We have gone to the highest level, including appealing it, and we have been told again we must pay. So the choice that we have is to say that we do not respect international law because we ourselves believe that we shouldn't pay, right? And then suffer the consequences of that, or we pay and then we are left as Kenyans to continue chasing for that money through other means.
Which was not adding up because the High Court ruled in 2012 that the two companies were non-existent entities that could not sue Kenya. Second, PricewaterhouseCoopers audit showed that the contract was won through bribery and goods were overpriced and some were never delivered, even though payments had been made. It was necessary to pay the debt so as not to attract huge interest penalties. Muthoni Kamani, who was then the Deputy General Solicitor at the time, bombarded the Treasury argument that it was a connection of Anura Pereira litigation to Switzerland that affected the issuing of sovereign bond known as the Eurobond. It was a back and forth argument of who was telling the truth. Next was the National Treasury PS Kamau Thuge addressing the Public Accounts Committee that Pereira was now demanding an addition of 3.05 billion Kenyan shillings for the services given to National Security Intelligence, now the NIS, to a related project known as the Flagstaff National Counterterrorism Center that was contracted in 2004.
Tonight, multi-billionaire Anura Pereira is claiming an additional 3.05 billion shillings from the Kenya government.
That's right, Pereira slapped Treasury with a demand note for a contract for the National Intelligence Service.
Here's KTN's Sam Ogina with more on that.
This project was different from the others. It was not amongst the projects that were evaluated by the PwC. In fact, that is why it has not been on the table.
It is upon PwC's auditing of Anglo Leasing projects that most of the contracts were cancelled, but not Flagstaff.
That authority came from somewhere up there, that due to national security considerations, PwC would not be allowed to access the project.
Dipe Kamani was paid a lump sum of $16.4 million in 2014 to facilitate the launch of Eurobond. This triggered the fury of Uhuru Kenyatta to prosecute Anglo Leasing principals in March 2015.
All the appropriate agencies to open up fresh investigations.
After almost a decade of groping in the dark over the identities of the persons believed to have masterminded the multi-billion shillings Anglo Leasing scandal, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, together with the Director of Public Prosecutions Keriako Tobiko, hauled to court 7 suspects to answer to charges of abuse of office and conspiracy to defraud the state. Former Finance Minister and current Kisii Senator Chris Obure, former Permanent Secretaries Joseph Magari, Sami Kyungu and Dave Mwangi, former Finance Secretary Samuel Bundotich, former Postmaster General Francis Chahonyo, and former Head of Debt Management in the Ministry of Finance David Lumumba Onyonka had their day in court before Nairobi Chief Magistrate Hanan Ndung'u.
11 years after the scandal had broke, we were still going in circle. 13 people connected to Anglo Leasing, including Deepak Kamani and former Minister Chris Obure, were indicted.
3 suspects in the multi-billion shilling Anglo Leasing case are free men. This is after a Nairobi court acquitted former Finance Minister Chris Obure, former Transport and Communication Permanent Secretary Sami Kyungu, and former Finance Secretary Samuel Bundotich of charges of abuse of office and breach of public trust in the 1.3 billion Anglo Leasing scandal. The 3 were implicated in 1 out of 18 tenders in the 55 billion Anglo Leasing scandal in a contract for the supply of equipment and services by the Postal Corporation of Kenya.
I have been called all sorts of names
But I'm glad that today all this has now come to an end and the truth has finally come out.
I give glory to God for what he has done. I thank everybody.
And now to another collapsed graft case. Businessman Deepak Kamani, his brother Rashmi Kamani, and 3 former permanent secretaries have been let off the hook in the 7 billion shillings Anglo Leasing case. Chief Magistrate Felix Kombo Friday ruled that the suspects were charged irregularly, citing glaring contradictions and inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. They were all charged with conspiracy to defraud the government through the multi-billion shillings Anglo Leasing contract known as the modernization of police security equipment and accessories between the year 2003 and 2004.
Do proper investigations to actually establish the real culprits of Anglo Leasing. Because I know Mwiraria could not have been involved in that mess.